Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you once again to the Harry Seymour Auditorium. And tonight, we have, again, a dynamic speaker who will be examining and discussing the business cycle. And I'm pleased and grateful to have you here this evening for this closing presentation for the Business Week sponsored by the College of the Bahamas School of Business. This week's activities were informative, inspiring, and if you were here yesterday, provoking or provocative, like Darryl Miller would say. Who were here last night? No one? Well, it was hosted by Miss Robin Thompson, the young lady sitting right over there. And there were many topics discussed that students had tremendous interest in. They discussed the national health care. I know most of you were interested in that. John Canoe Carnival and the intervention or the introduction of the Chinese interest in the Bahamas. The School of Business, the Banking and Economics and Finance Department has, since 2005, worked in collaboration with the Nassau Institute, engaging in lectures and seminars to promote economic growth, free market economy with limited government that embrace private property rights, consumer sovereignty, and the rule of law. This evening, this collaboration will continue. I would like now to introduce a colleague and a great friend of the School of Business, Banking and Finance Department, the Vice President and Treasurer of the Nassau Institute, who would introduce our speaker. Could you give him a round of applause?
Thank you, everyone. It's my pleasure to let you know how this thing comes about, because without our sponsors and you, and probably the most important one, our speaker, it won't happen. But before I get to introduce Mr. French, I just want to say thank you to a few people. The Templeton Religion Trust, Compass Point, our patrons, Donald Tomlinson, Go Ahead Biscuits, Arizona Drinks, our supporters, J.S. Johnson and Majestic Tours, and our donors, Bahamas First. Oh, I forgot, I have one more thing to do before I introduce Mr. French. Very quickly, and they may be angry, but we're going to do it anyway. The board of the Institute has approved some recognition for a couple people in the audience tonight, Mr. and Mrs. Lee Rodney, in recognition of their untiring efforts to advance the cause of liberty and raise the level of public policy debate, not only here, but throughout the world that they participate in these things. Just as an aside, in their hotel, which is Compass Point, before we get to that, they display Atlas Shrugged and interesting books like that that keep us all going. And we'd just like to say thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Rodney. Thank you. And that's for you. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. French. This lecture series, The Evolution and Future of the State, came about as a result of our secretary, George Borlandelli, seeing these gentlemen speak on some other topics. There's a little brochure in the back. We have 2 more lectures coming up on April the 9th and May the 28th. Now to Mr. French. Douglas French writes for the Casey Research and is also an associate scholar with the Johnson Center, Troy University. He is the author of 3 books, Early Speculative Bubbles and Increases in the Supply of Money, The Failure of Common Knowledge and Walk Away, The Rise and Fall of the Home Ownership Myth. Doug French is the former president of the Ludwig von Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. Mr. French is here to speak to us about business cycles and the state. Please welcome Mr. Douglas French.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, George. Thank you, Lee. Everyone who's made my stay extraordinary. I assume this is the student side of the room. Is that my best guess? And you're all economics students? No. How many are taking economics? Oh, well, there you go. And what kind of economics are you learning? What? I didn't get that. Macroeconomics. So have you heard the name John Maynard Keynes? Yes. Well, this is kind of the anti-Keynesian view. So if you're tired of Keynes, then get ready for a little something different. Now, of course, the big title of the speech is Government and the State, but you'll notice there's a different title up on the screen, Austrian Business Cycle in Real Life, the Las Vegas Experience. I spent 22 years in Las Vegas, and I think I was there for, well, I don't think, I know, I was there for both the boom and I was there for the bust. And if you have the opportunity later in life, participate in the booms and try to avoid the busts if you have the chance. But we're going to get into that a little more as we as we go along here. But see if I can operate this. So the first thing I need to do, being that you're students, we're going to start with a little theory, and then we get to kind of more of the fun part. You may have the impression that business cycles start, or occur, the ups and downs of the market occur more or less by themselves, that they come with the seasons like the spring and the summer and the fall and the winter. But the Austrian view is the business cycle is engendered by monetary intervention. And maybe that's something you've heard a lot about with zero interest rates and those kind of interventions by the Federal Reserve and other banks, central banks around the world. And in the second point, you can see it's typically an increase in the money supply by central banks. The idea is that if more money is created, more economic activity is created, the borrowing costs of money will go down, people will borrow more money, and more jobs will be created. Now there's something called time preference, and that determines the amount that people spend in the present versus the future. If you have a low time preference, it means that you're willing to save your money and spend it later. If you have a high time preference, it means that you want the money now and you want to spend it right now. So how would you describe yourself? Are you high time preference people or low time preference people? You're high time preference people. Thank you for your honesty. That's correct. So you probably charge up your credit cards at 16, 18, 22% so that you can have your stuff now and worry about it, paying for it later. People who want to save a lot, they are more low time preference people. So high time preference people they value consumption right away. Now, this is where we get into, there's a collective time preference amongst everyone in society. If there's a lot of savings going on in society, if people are saving for the future, then interest rates will be low, people are saving, and then that's a signal to entrepreneurs that with low interest rates that they should be investing in what Austrians would call higher order goods. Now, I wouldn't expect you to know what a higher order goods are, but let's just say a higher order good is like a factory, or it's like land. It's like, I throw casinos in there. I'm going to throw casinos in there because That's what we're going to talk about tonight. And whereas lower order goods are chewing gum or things that you consume right away, consumer goods. So so what happens is, even though the collective time preference of society hasn't changed, when central banks lower their rates, when they lower their interest rates, entrepreneurs are fooled, and they believe that more higher order goods are demanded. They feel like, okay, this is a signal for me to build more houses, to build more factories, to build more casinos, to invest in land, to invest in stocks and bonds. And so that's what entrepreneurs will do when they're fooled by these lower interest rates that are created by central banks. Now, when this happens, there are all kinds of distortions that occur. The prices and wages are built up in capital goods industry. The malinvestment, you're going to hear me say that word many times. The malinvestment leads to too many houses, too many buildings, too many factories, too much land being purchased, or too many casinos being built. There might be even there's a new casino project here in town, right? What's the name of it? Yeah, and there might be a person or two in the room that thinks that maybe that might just be a malinvestment. Who knows? So anyway, consumer tastes haven't changed, despite the low interest rates, what has to happen is that these malinvestments are liquidated. So we've got this illusion of a boom that, of course, ends in a bust. This wasted malinvestment is liquidated. There's a recession or a depression. It's the market's way of purging itself. I heard a speech last week in Auburn, Alabama at an academic conference where a gentleman said, we should all rejoice when we have a recession because that means the healing has begun. Well, believe me, I've been through both of these, and I didn't rejoice when the recession came because I got considerably poorer, and that's what happens. But that is the cleansing. These are the jobs that go away that were created by the boom, that were unsustainable. They go away during the recession. It is indeed that cleansing of that illusionary boom that was created by the money created by the Fed. Now this can take a very short period of time, and it has. Very few people have heard about the Depression of 1920 to 1921. Everybody's heard of the Great Depression that went from, say, 29 or 30, 31 to 37 or 39 in the United States. Well, there was a depression that was even more severe from 1920 to 21, and we don't hear about it because interest rates were not lowered. They were actually increased. There was not a very active Federal Reserve or central bank to intervene, and the government shrank rather than got bigger, and this depression cleansed itself right away, and normal activity could continue. On the other hand, booms are elongated by more doses of monetary intervention. The longer that the Federal Reserve or the central bank, whichever central bank it is, the longer they keep pumping money into this, the longer these recessions play out. In fact, that's what we're seeing right now, is that this recession, from my point of view, has not gone away, and I understand in your country it hasn't gone away either, with pretty high unemployment, and still an economy is not that good. And again, this is brought out by low interest rates that are keeping malinvestments in business when in fact they should go broke, with that capital being transferred to more efficient operators who can manage that capital better. The greater the monetary expansion, the longer the boom sustained. We're seeing that right now. You see, we saw a boom from, say, 2001 until 2008, and now the bust is taking even longer. The recovery phase weeds out inefficient and unprofitable businesses. That's what capitalism's supposed to do. Capitalism is supposed to weed out inefficient operators. It's supposed to get rid of business people who are not very good at what they do. When you have governments that prop up bad businesses, and I've heard that possibly some of that goes on here in the Bahamas, then that continues, that waste continues for years and years and years, and it's just a drain on capital. Monetary intervention, if you get anything out of this talk tonight, it cannot increase the supply of real goods. It merely diverts capital from avenues the market would dictate toward wasteful malinvestment. In other words, the capital would go where it would naturally flow. Capital goes where it's treated the best until the government intervenes, and then it is directed most likely to people who are friends of government. So I'm sure you students heard that line, and you've decided immediately that you're going to pursue a career in being a friend of government, and I don't blame you for that. The bottom line here is that a boom is an illusionary prosperity. There is a slide here. So in the market economy, one of the most vital functions of the businessman is to be an entrepreneur. It's a person who invests in productive methods. They buy equipment, they hire labor to produce something which they're not sure will reap any return. In fact, employees get paid first, entrepreneurs get paid last. So everybody thinks every entrepreneur is wealthy, every business person's making all kinds of money. It's not true. They take all the risk, they get their money at the end, whereas employees get the money first. In short, the entrepreneurial function is a function of forecasting an uncertain future. In fact, entrepreneurs don't get paid at all unless they guess correctly about consumer demand, that they have a product that the market wants. So if the entrepreneur forecasts well or better than the competitors, he'll reap the profits. The better his forecasting, the higher profits he'll learn. If on the other hand he's a poor forecaster, overestimates demand, suffers losses, and goes broke. Unless you're Goldman Sachs, or you're General Motors, or you're some kind of friend of government, and then you might get a bailout. I worked at a small bank, and they didn't bail us out. In fact, they closed us down. We were the 7th or 8th bank to be closed down. So I've been on the closing. I've never had the privilege of being bailed out. I've had the privilege of being closed down and then being sued for it. I was hoping that would get a laugh. Businesses, in short, they're happy to borrow. The new expanded money supply is coming to them at all cheaper rates. They use the money to invest in capital goods. Again, those are those higher order goods, capital goods, higher order goods, land, factories, casinos, that kind of thing. Eventually, money gets paid out in higher rents to land, higher wages to workers for capital goods industries. The increased business demand bids up labor costs. Businesses think they can pay these higher costs because they've been fooled by the government and bank intervention in the loan market this decisively important tampering interest rate signal in the marketplace. I remember a time when I worked at the bank, just the lowest level employees, the price just got incredibly high because in the boom in Las Vegas, it was just hard to find any sort of labor and hold on to it because you were competing with casinos, you were competing with everybody for labor. Now the fun part of the story begins, and this is Las Vegas. People of all, does everybody know have they heard of Las Vegas? Everybody's heard of Las Vegas? Good. Well, I'm looking at the student section. Maybe they haven't been there yet. Do you want to go? Yeah, everybody wants to go to Vegas. They wanted to go, but the experts have always been wondering about Las Vegas. Even this cover of Life magazine in 1955, newest in Las Vegas, girls at the Moulin Rouge. But what it says at the top, Las Vegas is the boom overextended. The boom overextended. This was June 20th, 1955. They were wondering. I mean, Las Vegas was barely a speck of dust in 1955. And the skeptics were already out there. In 1994, Las Vegas hits Time magazine. It's the new all-American city. For some reason, they went from Sin City to be an all-American city. Bring your kids, bring everybody. We got trapeze, we got clowns, we're going to take care of your kids, we're going to take care of you. Oh, it's a great place to come. So, this is the Fed funds rate. This is the rate that the Federal Reserve controls. And so when I was talking earlier about intervention in the interest rate market, this is what I'm talking about. So we can see the Fed funds rate, and it's a little hard to see the date, but there in about 2000, the Fed funds rate is over 6%. And you can see that on the left side of the graph. And then 9/11 happens, and I remember 9/11 like it was yesterday, because I was still in bed because it was Pacific Standard Time. One plane had already gone into the building. I was watching TV, second plane goes into the building, and we go to work and go, holy cow, what's going to happen in Vegas? And my wife calls me. She's a lawyer at the Venetian Hotel Casino, and she says, every convention is canceling. Every convention we've had 50 cancellations of conventions today. And that's what Vegas lives on, is conventions. So everybody stopped. And nobody pulled any housing permits, nobody did anything. But you can see with these interest rates that the Federal Reserve hit the monetary gas and they lowered rates all the way down to 1%. And that's the kind of intervention I'm talking about when I talked earlier that occurred. You can see that it fell dramatically with the Federal Reserve trying to spur the economy after 9/11. Then this is my favorite magazine cover. If the Bahamas ever makes the cover of Time and it says, "It's the Bahamas, baby," you know you're in trouble. This is July 26, 2004. These two young ladies, which were probably pretty easy to find somewhere in Las Vegas, and they're in the middle of some kind of bottle service club. And by this time, the boom I just said earlier that nobody was building houses. Rates went down. They started building houses like crazy because you couldn't find a house. Interest rates had gotten so low that you could sell anything. And the greatest story I ever heard about being creative in buying a house was that a couple went to Home Depot and hung around in Home Depot at the for sale by owner signs. And they camped out there until a couple came along to buy a for sale by owner sign. And the couple who was waiting tapped them on the shoulder and said, are you selling your home? And they said, yes. May we follow you? And they followed them. They bought the sign anyway. They followed them home and bought their house from them. That's how scarce houses were at that point. But then builders, as builders do, began to build and build and build. Now, this is another one of my favorite pictures for obvious reasons. And this is it says the Strip is back. Strip is back. These are the two Fertitta brothers. They are part of Stations Casino. And of course, Stations Casino is going to come up later in my story. But boy, they were hot. A couple of young guys, you can imagine. They were living the life of Riley, and they were, doing very well with various casinos around town. So this was, again, I think in Time magazine or a major magazine. And again, this was how hot Vegas was. Now, here is a graph, and it's a little busy. For those of you who aren't used to looking at a subdivision map, this is an aerial photo of a subdivision, and it's a subdivision that's about half done. As you can tell, there's houses on the left of it and houses on the right. But what I've overlaid here is the Fed funds rate is in red, and the land price, the average land price per acre, and this is not including casino land, this is just residential land. And then the black line is the price of houses, and you can see what happens when the Fed funds rate falls. So you had this dramatic fall in Fed funds rate, and then you can see the price of land just absolutely take off. And when I say take off, it went from, say, $100,000 an acre to over $900,000 an acre, almost a tenfold. And I remember before 2000, when land would go for something like 20-something an acre. And it got up to, at the peak in 2000 and 2007, of $1 million an acre. You can see that housing prices went up as well, not quite as big. It's not as much of a capital good as land is. Land is further back in the production chain, and so as prices get lower, those businesses, those assets further back in that production chain, like land, are going to go up and then come down more than land. So the price of houses went from 100, say, to 300. I bought a house in 2000. I paid $250,000 for it. I remember at a party that I had a person, and I had a normal tract house. It wasn't anything special. And I had a person offer me $600,000 cash for it. I sure wish I had taken it. I finally sold the house in 2011 for $10,000 less than what I bought it for. And I was happy to do it. But you can imagine that people who bought land at $900,000 an acre and then watched it come back down to $100,000 an acre, a 90% drop in value. And again, it corresponds with that spike in interest rates that was engineered by the Federal Reserve. Now, the part of the story And just to run through, and there's a lot of numbers here, but it's hopefully you'll find it interesting. Most of the land in the state of Nevada is owned by the federal government. So for those of you who've been to Las Vegas, you fly into Vegas and you see nothing but desert all around it. And you go, boy, they could build forever and ever and ever. Well, no, the government owns most of that land. But when the housing boom was going on, they engineered legislation so that they would auction off pieces of it. And so they had these what they call BLM auctions, Bureau of Land Management auctions, and they were great fun to go to. I was never a bidder, but I would always go. And so the chronology of what happened at these auctions is very instructive. And I just want to overlay this with the Fed funds rate. The Fed funds rate was, say, 4% in May of 2001, 4%. They auctioned off a 1,905 acre parcel, and it was sold for $24,672 an acre. Remember that number, $24,672 per acre for 1,900 acres. In 2002, November 2002, the Fed funds rate is 1.25. So they have slashed it by, say, 75%. They had an auction, a BLM auction, and the average price was $159,944 per acre. So they went from $24,000 an acre to $159,000 per acre in the space of just over a year. On June 5th, 2003, a year later, Fed funds still at 1.25. The BLM auction, the average price per acre went for $233,452 per acre. That's a 46% increase. And I remember a CFO of one of the large home builders admitting to me that he was having trouble justifying the purchase of these high-priced land parcels to the brass of his company far away. He indicated that assuming today's home prices did not make any sense for any land purchases, it didn't make any of them viable, and that they just had to project that home prices would continue to increase at some rapid rate that they had the past few years to pencil. So at that point, they're paying prices for land that would not work economically, but had to assume that the trend would continue. So essentially at that point, home builders went from being home builders to land speculators. So here we are in June 2004. Fed funds are now 1%. And the BLM sets a new record, both in terms of the amount of land sold, $707,185,000 worth of land, and the price per acre was $279,299 per acre. Total sales figures more than double the appraised value. In other words, when they would sell land in a BLM auction, the first process is that the land is nominated for sale. Then they would have an appraiser go out and make a fair market value of it. They would start the bidding at that fair market value, and then it would go from there. In that case, in 2014, all the acreage was appraised at about $309 million, and it ended up selling for $707 million. So they paid more than double the appraised price. And 2,000 people showed up. They had 460 bidders. And that was so much different than 3 years before, when they didn't even have a dozen bidders that had showed up. In fact, I sat next to a couple. He showed me his paddle. He was fully prepared to buy some of this great Las Vegas land, and he never got the paddle off of his lap. The price of land would go up. I watched my watch generally from the time they'd start auctioning to the final bid, and on many of the small parcels, they would sell the parcels for double and triple the price in a time of about 60 to 90 seconds. That's how fast land was going at the time. So it was just extraordinarily heated, and again, this was driven by these low interest rates. Now, you can see that this affected other parts of the market. You can see this is the commercial. This is a graph of commercial property, and the little faint line in the middle is the vacancy rate. You can see that it goes down until 2006, and it starts up in 2007 after the crash, and you can see the inventory. So you can see what developers do. Got low interest rates, they think there's a bunch of demand, so they're going to build more. They're going to build more space, and then you see the vacancy go right up with the inventory. Same way with commercial office. You see the same sort of activity. The vacancy rate goes down, and then it heads up as more and more inventory is built. And in the same way with industrial, it's even more so with industrial. It falls dramatically there in the 05, 06 range, and then you can see that as the inventory climbs, then the vacancy rises. Now, same thing happens with jobs. You can see that, and again, I've put Fed funds in the red here, and you can see the unemployment rate, what it did in Las Vegas. It's not altogether different than what you had here in the Bahamas. When there was a boom, we got down to about, this was the official rate, it was a little over 4%. It was very hard to find labor. It was a very tight labor market. But then in the bust in Las Vegas, even though the national unemployment rate hit about 10, in Las Vegas it hit about 14 in 2011, and it still is hovering over the national rate. All driven by construction employment. For those of you who are kind of maybe wondering why you're going to college, and maybe, maybe I ought to just put on one of those hard hats and fancy yellow vests or whatever and work on a job here in town. Well, when there's boom time, you can see that construction employment goes way up, and then when there's a bust, it comes crashing down. So you can decide you're much better off having a career and having something a little less volatile than having construction work. So what's interesting here is that we have this cluster of errors. Theory of depression must account for this cluster of errors. Why do people make all these mistakes? We have entrepreneurs making mistakes all the time. There's people making mistakes. But in a boom and a bust, they make them all together. There's this mammoth cluster of errors. It appears swiftly, it's suddenly, at the moment of economic crisis, lingers through the depression period until the recovery. The third universal fact is that the theory of the cycle must account for, invariably, the booms and busts are much more intense and severe in capital goods industries, making machines and equipments, ones producing industrial raw materials or construction, industrial plants, making consumer goods. So consumer goods, in other words, they hang in pretty well. It is the industrial goods, the higher order goods that I was speaking of earlier, that have the issues. So what happens? What does all this look like? This is the Echelon project, and this was going to be a $5 billion project on the Strip, and you can see that it got half built, and then it stopped, and it still is at that point. The Fontainebleau. This is one of my favorites. This was a $2.9 billion project. Went bankrupt. Carl Icahn, fairly famous speculator in bad paper, bought it for $150 million. So $209 billion, $150 million is what he bought it for. Hasn't done a thing with it other than strip out all the interior furnishings, sell it to a property downtown to make up part of his money back, maybe if not all. And the rumor is that he may dismantle the entire building and just sell the steel to make money with it. So the Harmon is a great example of boom time construction that goes so fast it's kind of shoddy. It was so shoddy that at the 18th floor it was a little out of kilter, so the elevator wouldn't go any higher than that. So they decided to have to take it down, and we'll see a picture later of that happening, because it's that's the Harmon. Manhattan West. This was out by my house. This was a multi-million-dollar project, and it was sold for $25 million in the last couple of years, and they've restarted this project. The Mercer, this project looks exactly like this today. They got a slab in place, and that's as far as it went. Park Lyon Mall lofts, same way. Shops at Summerlin, this one got done. This was, but the point I want to make about this one is that the developer was General Growth Properties, and General Growth Properties is one of the biggest property developers in the United States. These guys were huge, and they weren't able to finish this project in the boom. But eventually it did get finished. Spanish View Towers. It still looks like this today. And for a long time, it had a construction crane sitting there, lonely. It finally, to have a construction crane on a site takes money, and finally they took it down. St. Regis Residence, these were going to be high-end condos by the Venetian Hotel and Casino. They got to the point where they got the steel up, but the market crashed, so they wrapped it up in a piece of essentially plastic to make like it was a finished building, but it's just sitting there vacant. Uptown is a project that never got finished. Vantage Loft, isn't that a pretty project? It never got anywhere. This project, Wyndham Blue, it actually did get finished. This is a project that, or not really a project, but a piece of land that this was the site of the old Frontier Hotel and Casino. 36 acres bought by the Alad Group for $1.2 billion. They were going to construct a $5.7 billion version of the Plaza Hotel, and that site looks exactly like that today. And they have sold that property, and I'll give you an update on everything. The unemployment now in Vegas as of December, 6.9%, again above the average. Office vacancy is still 21%. Industrial vacancy still 7%, which is quite an improvement. Retail vacancy 10%, which is very high. It was as low as 2% at the time. The median price of single-family home now is $202,000. That's up 58% from the bottom, which was $128,000. But remember, in June 2006, the average price of a home in Las Vegas, $315,000. So if you ever think for a second, if anybody ever tells you you can't get hurt buying a home, they are absolutely wrong. 18 months ago, there were probably 80,000 people in Vegas that had not made a payment on their houses in 3 years, and they were still living there because the lenders could not prove that they had standing to foreclose. The Echelon site was sold to the Malaysian group, Genting Gaming, $350 million for the 87 acres. That was the first slide that I showed you. That was a $5-6 billion project. Sold the site for $350 million. Fontainebleau, you remember, Carl Icahn paid $150,000. He auctioned off the furnishings. Just the other day, Bank of America agreed to pay a group of lenders $300 million to settle allegations that it improperly advanced funds toward the construction of that project. That 36-acre site that I just showed you, $1.2 billion in 2007, sold to James Packer Crown Resorts from Australia, $260 million. Value of that property fell $1 billion essentially. The Harmon's being demolished. MGM Resorts said it would pay $173 million to resolve the lawsuit, $20 million going to the City Center, $153 to Perini, which is the contractor, and so that has been a bundle of litigation. Manhattan West sold in 2013 for between 21 and 23 million. That was a $350 million project, so you can see how far that fell. Mercer remains abandoned, Park Line still untouched, Shops at Center mostly completed, Spanish Tower still undeveloped, St. Regis is camouflaged, Uptown still not developed, and so on. This is what deconstruction looks like, floor by floor. You know, in Vegas, they make a big deal about demolishing buildings. This is too close to too many other hotels and casinos. They're not going to be able to demolish it, so they're going to have to take it down piece by piece, and it's expected to be $11.5 million to take the building down. Now, this is a fun slide. I just threw this in. Gaming company giants, because we're not just talking about real estate, we're not just talking about land and that kind of thing in a business cycle. The companies in general get caught up in this. So gaming company giants, public, private, then bankrupt, is the title of this slide. Fertitta family started with a single casino 40 years ago. The company grew to 18 casinos and resorts. They took the company public in '93. That means they sold stock to shareholders. Then in 2007, when the market was really hot, interest rates were really low, they borrowed a bunch of money, $5.7 billion, and paid $90 a share to all the shareholders to buy them out. As part of that, the Fertittas walked away with $1.5 billion. In 2009, because of all that debt, they filed bankruptcy with $6.5 billion in debt. Stations exited bankruptcy in 2011 with $4 billion less in debt, and with the company's 18 casinos back to the Fertitta family and their partners. Fertitta brothers put in $273 million in the reassembled company, and now they own 58% again. And just as a couple of weeks ago, I found in the Vegas paper a A headline, a revived locals market could push station casinos to an IPO, which means they may have a public offering again. So they may go full circle, a couple times here. Same thing happens with Harrah's. They start as a single bingo parlor in Reno in 1937. 2005, the company buys Caesars. It's the biggest gaming company in the world, 40 casinos, 100,000 employees. 2006, they go private because the money's cheap. They borrow a bunch of money. They buy the company for $15 billion. In 2008, the company assumes another $20 billion in debt. And as of this January, they, of course, have filed for bankruptcy, Chapter 11. Unfortunately, my bankruptcy friends are all in Nevada, and they file bankruptcy in Delaware and Illinois. So my friends in the bankruptcy business are very, very annoyed. When boom times happen, wages for even workers go up. I decided to throw this slide in here. Walmart wages, we always hear Walmart never pays anything. Well, they do when they have to, and they're paying $17 an hour up in states in the United States that are producing shale oil and that kind of thing in the Midwest. So when you have a boom time, which we've had up until recently in oil, then they'll pay good wages. Problem is, oil price has been cut in half. It's cut in half in a matter of months. And you can see the headline here on Bloomberg Business, Oil's Plunge Hurts Office Sales and Calgary Leases. Oops. Oil crash may kill the Texas housing boom. Again, you have a boom in oil, you have a bust in oil, and houses are suffering. So when does the next cycle begin? Why do business cycles tend to be recurrent, continuous? Banks have, when they recover, they're sounder condition, they're confident, and they'll start to lend again, and that'll create the seeds for essentially the next bust. You can see here, I'll run through this very fast, but this is some work done by a friend of mine, and you can see that this is the Fed funds rate, and you can see where it peaks, these little peaks. Right after these little peaks in the Fed funds rate, you have a recession. The Fed funds rate has been on the floor lately, but they're talking about raising it, and if they do, we might see some kind of recession or certainly some kind of crash. This is the true money supply. It's the Austrian version of the money supply. And again, you can see the same sort of pattern as money supply decreases, or at least the percentage increase in money decreases, then again, it brings about a recession. When the Fed appears loose, as Yellen tapers, the Fed is tightening. So that's just continuing that graph. Again, we've got the Fed doing all kinds of nefarious things with their balance sheet, reverse repos, which, well, we can't stay out that late enough to talk about really what that is. But they, again, are expanding their balance sheet all they can to keep the money flowing. Fed leverage, this is the central bank, 77-1. Believe me, no business anywhere would want to be leveraged at 77-1, yet our central bank is leveraged that high. So a lot of things could go wrong. That is a bit of a cautionary tale of what can happen. I was in the middle of it. I worked at a bank. I had options in the bank. I had ownership in the bank. I was doing real well. I thought it would never end. So the note that I want to leave all of you with, if you have a chance, the opportunity to participate in a boom, make sure you hold on to it before it crashes. Don't be wealthy and then be poor. Be wealthy and wise, and don't think it's going to last forever, because whatever asset you have that has gone up in value had nothing to do with your smarts. Just because you bought a stock and it goes up, or you buy some land and it goes up, didn't have anything to do with how smart you are. You are in the right place at the right time, and maybe you helped to make a good decision, but what can go up can go down. So when it goes up, take a little off the table, take a lot off the table, and wait for the next crash to come, and then get back in there and buy again. And I hope it happens to all of you. Believe me, I was there, now I'm here, but it's given me an opportunity to tell a few good stories all over the world. So I want to thank Rick and George and Lee and everybody at the Nassau Institute. They're a wonderful group to have this speaking series. And you know, there's liberty is a wonderful thing that we can spread throughout the world. Sometimes it gets frustrating that people don't see it our way, as many as you want, but as they say, people lose their heads in mass, and then they regain their heads one by one. And so we're trying to reach people. We're trying to reach people one by one that the true path to prosperity is through liberty and free markets. So with that, I thank you, and I'm here for questions.
We're going to have 15 minutes for questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening again. Yes, when I was living in New York, the Federal Reserve wasn't federal, but it had some reserve. Does it have any reserves now?
I'm so, yeah. Well, I didn't want to get stumped with the first question. So you were in New York, right? I got that much. And you were in New York, and there was a Federal Reserve, but what was the rest of that?
Well, it's not.
Oh,
It's not federal.
the old Federal Reserve is a private entity. Well, I don't think that that is an open debate amongst a lot of people, and I'm afraid that your speaker tonight does not believe the Federal Reserve is a private entity. It is owned by its member banks, but it is certainly controlled by the U.S. government. And it takes its cues from the executive branch, primarily. I've done a lot of work on Arthur Burns, who was Fed chair during the Nixon administration. And Arthur Burns and Nixon spoke dozens of times a day. Nixon insisted that he gun the money supply to get himself reelected. And there are numerous examples of this throughout modern Fed history. I agree with you that in the beginning, it was run by bankers, it was independent, and it probably functioned as providing liquidity to the banking system when it was needed, when the United States was an agricultural economy, but now it is being used for political and social engineering purposes by economics professors who kowtow to those in public office. So I am not a believer that it is a private institution and that it would be better if it was some kind of government institution. I believe it is given the power to create money out of nowhere. And private entities are not given that kind of power. So,
Does it have any reserve then?
what's that?
Does it have any reserve?
Nothing's happening to the reserve?
Does it have any reserve?
Is there any reserves left?
Is there any reserves left in the Federal Reserve? No, there's all kinds of reserves left in the Federal Reserve. There are trillions and trillions of dollars that the banking system is parking at the Federal Reserve because the Fed is paying 25 basis points on those reserves. So rather than the banks lending that money out, they are essentially keeping it at the Fed and it's doing nothing. That's why you've seen the Fed's balance sheet quadruple, and there's really been not much price inflation that has come from it because the money is not being lent out by banks in the banking system. The banking system will create, the commercial banking system, through making loans, will generally create about 85% of the money supply. But right now, the Fed, as it gets bigger and bigger, the regulators still have their thumb on the commercial bankers. They're not making loans, so the money is sitting in reserves and not being lent out to normal people and businesses to create jobs and start businesses like they normally would. So yeah, they have plenty of reserves, all kinds of reserves, crazy amount of reserves. Yes, sir.
We've seen the casino markets in Macau pretty much collapse.
Yes.
We're concerned about that here because of our new and somewhat questionable casino industries that we are trying to develop.
Mm-hmm.
Would you comment on that collapse and its impact directly upon the Las Vegas market, with which you have expertise in?
Yeah, the Vegas market, collapsed for a few years. It's come back. It's come back somewhat, but certainly operators like Steve Wynn and Sheldon Adelson, who have properties in Macau and Singapore, in the case of Sheldon Adelson, really are doing well only because of Macau. Now they've got a problem in Macau because of the crackdown on junket activity.
From China.
Yeah, from China. So I think Singapore continues to do very well, but I don't think gaming is the is the panacea or the magic bullet that everybody thinks it is. And I know there's some people in this room who I won't mention who are very skeptical of that particular project you're referring to because there's not necessarily overflow traffic at the Atlantis, and now there is an even bigger project on the way, and Atlantic City is essentially collectively gone bust, and so there's only so many gaming dollars out there. My mother, this is being televised.
She won't see it.
Yeah, she probably won't. But she plays, and she is somewhat sought after. But she doesn't play that much to be sought after as a gamer. But she plays in the Indian casinos and occasionally goes to Vegas or wherever it may be. My point is that they are going after lower and lower players to try to fill their machines, and I think now listen, this place is gorgeous, and there are plenty of other reasons to come and enjoy your island, so that may be the difference, and that may make it work. But if you're trying to attract gamblers to the middle of Kansas or even the deserts of Nevada, I think it's that demographic is getting older and older and older, and people my age are still, still have mortgages to service, and pensions are in trouble, and I think, in the future, I don't think, the average retired fireman is going to be able to necessarily sit and spend his or her golden years in front of a slot machine. Maybe the retired person will, but anybody else who was funding their own retirement through a 401k, unless they were extraordinary investors, will probably be working until the day they drop. Don't let me go on about this subject because it's extraordinarily depressing, and I don't want to depress the young people in the audience. You? Yeah.
Last question.
Last question. How could it be? It's not 10 minutes up, is it? Why? Why are we on such a tight timetable?
We may have another one then.
Oh, all right. Okay.
You spoke about the nefarious activities of the Federal Reserve. Yesterday, the governor of the Federal Reserve announced that they would hold back on increasing the Federal Reserve rate. The stock market went up about 200+%.
Yeah.
Normally, after every trough, there's a recovery, and the government has always participated in that recovery. In your view, has the Keynesian done anything correctly?
Yes, I think they have. I think that the Keynesian model of central banking has not allowed in their attempt to keep the economy from bottoming out severely and the stock market out severely, and to have their friends on Wall Street go broke. They have flooded the system with money, and that has kept those banks alive, and possibly that has made things not quite as bad as it could have been. But the downside of that is it doesn't get any better, and that's why we are in this malaise that we have, that I believe will continue on and on and on, that will keep inefficient operators in business. It keeps, Citibank has been bailed out 5 times. I don't believe, maybe this is a group of people that think big city bankers in New York should be bailed out 5 times, but I'm of the view that they should lose their jobs and the bank should go under, and that those assets should go to the highest bidder in a bankruptcy court. And that's why the housing market hasn't improved. That's why you still have 20 or 30% of the homes mortgaged in the United States are still underwater, because these big banks refuse to negotiate with people who are underwater on their mortgage. They don't have to negotiate with them because they've been bailed out, and they can insist on these homeowners paying 100%. But if that paper went into the market in a bankruptcy court, it would sell on pennies on the dollar. The new buyer would go to the existing homeowner and say, listen, we bought your mortgage at 50 cents on the dollar. I can see the house is worth 70 cents on the dollar. Let's make a deal at 65, and you start paying again. Will you do that? Yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'd love to stay here. And away we would go. But instead, the big bank, and I count Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in that, they get bailed out by the government, and then they browbeat individuals who got no bailout, by the way. Don't run away, don't leave the room. They didn't get bailed out, and they're supposed to pay $100 dollars. And it's my belief that that's why we have a very slow recovery, if it's a recovery at all. And until the market clears, until it cleanses itself, until we have a depression, until we have, a 1920-like depression where, goods and commodity prices fell 40% and grain prices fell, that wages were allowed to fall. Until we get that kind of correction, then we're going to struggle through this kind of economy for a long, long time, and it's not going to be very pleasant. And with that uplifting note, let me say one more thing, though, if I might. A friend of mine has this analogy about 3 horses, and just so it's not all negative. There's 3 horses, and one of the horses is free trade, and one of the horses is technological gains. And then the third horse is government, and that's the stupid horse. So it's a 3-horse race. As long as the 2 horses, the the free trade horse and the technology horse stay ahead of the stupid horse, we'll all be better off in the long run. So I'll leave you with that. Keep rooting for the two horses. Wait?
Yes.
Oh, I thought I got to leave.
No, no. As a token of our appreciation for your visit to Bahamas, we hope it's not the last. We want to present you with this book, Reminiscing 2, by local photographer, photographs of Old Nassau. Hope you
Well,
enjoy
thank
them.
you. Thank you so much. This is the cab I took in from the, no, I'm sorry. George gave me a ride. That was just a joke. Thank you so much, George. Again, your hospitality has been wonderful. Here, I'll get out of here in a minute.
Don't go.
Don't go again?
No,
Stay where I'm at?
The rest.
Oh, okay.
Well, on behalf of the Nassau Institute, we'd like to thank you again for your presence here. I'd like to ask Dean Romelda Moxie to come and do the closing thanks of this event. And I would also like to say that it was a privilege to have Mr. French here in Bahamas. He studied under Murray Rothbard. In fact, Murray Rothbard was his thesis director, if I recall well. And the depression that you have heard about has a history that everybody recognized as the work on the Great Depression. And that author was Murray and Rothbard. So you've been privileged by having Mr. French here, a student of Murray Rothbard in Nevada, Las Vegas. And I hope you take that into account and start learning more about this. And thank you.